Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's having a good day. So we have two guest hosts on this week. We've got Fran. We've got I don't know how to say her name. We'll get to it when I do the introductions. But we also have my fiance, and we've got our resident Kanakistani for the host's chair, though he was supposed to be sick. Anyways, I'm going to start and let's go ahead and introduce my lovely fiance, Kota. Say hello, Kota.
Hello, Kota.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep doing that. And then we are going to transition to our resident Kanakistanian, Soviet Kanakistanian, Dale, from the Soviet state of Kanakistani.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And for the record, I am sick, just less so than I thought I would be a couple days ago. So, with that being said, it is nice to be here with all of you.
And then we have our lovely guest host Freya, who we have not had on for a little over a month now. Say hello, Freya.
Hello.
And then we have a guest host from Tennessee. I don't know how to say your name. How do you say it?
Dracana.
Dracana. Okay, Dracana.
Mhm.
And Dracana definitely has a fucking accent, but that is okay because all accents are welcome here, as evidenced by the dirty Frenchy Frenchman that we have from Kanakistan. Uh, okay, so let's hop into this. Who here has ever spent time in a quote unquote high demand religion?
Depends what you mean by high demand.
High
Um,
demand. No masturbation, no porn, no no sexual gratification of any kind, whether it be by yourself or from another person, except for at the point that you are married. And there are certain other things like no celebrating religions, no celebrating holidays, no celebrating birthdays. You have to attend church every fucking time that there is a service. You have to go out in service when you're 18. You're expected to go on and do missionary work. They expect you to settle down, get married, have, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, and just be a faithful servant to the church and give all of your money.
Think of it as the most uncomfortable cocktail between Mormons, heavy Catholics, and the Amish.
hmm. I
Well,
guess under that definition, I'd have to say probably not.
Mennonites are definitely a high demand religion. I was raised in a high demand, quote unquote, religion. Uh, but Jehovah's Witnesses are also more of a doomsday high demand religion because they think we are in the end time of the end time. They think Armageddon will be here soon and we will all be dead. But another one of those religions is Mormonism, also known as the Church of Latter-day Saints, LDS. Not to be confused with LSD.
That's the fun stuff.
um so I picked up on a story thanks to Coda. Now I've been following Jodi Hildebrandt for a long time because I've been following one of her victims since the late 2000s. Um Adam Paul Steed, who you'll see clips of video with Adam Paul Steed today. Adam Paul Steed grew up in the Mormon religion. He got married in the Mormon religion. But while he was growing up, he was abused by a Boy Scout leader. And him and his father are who led the charge against Boy Scouts of the U.S. Because the Boy Scouts of the U.S., 1/3 of its membership was Mormon. But because I've been following him through that, I also followed him through his encounter with Jodi Hildebrandt, who just for a quick rundown is an extremely abusive Mormon woman who seems to think she either works for Christ or is the second coming of Christ. Either way, she has done some pretty despicable things. But thanks to Coda got me onto a news story about a YouTube family. The screen name was 8 Passengers because it was the wife, Ruby Frankie, the husband, Kevin Frankie, and their 6 kids.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm doing it too. And I was not aware that at the time that Coda said anything to me about it, that Jodi Hildebrandt had actually finally been caught for her abusive ways.
To give
And
you
so-
a tiny sample of the abuse, Ruby had literally on her own camera told her son, "You don't need to eat." As her son is saying, "Mommy, I'm hungry. Please give me food." You don't need to eat.
Yeah, that was her youngest child too.
And this kid, you see dark circles where the eyes are starting to sunken in his face. So if that triggers you as a humane problem, be ready to be pissed.
So there's a lot of issues in the Mormon Church. One of them is privacy issues, especially when it comes to teens and development. She had taken away the locks on doors. She had taken away doors. They had even gone so far as to make their eldest son sleep on the floor. But this,
Why?
the majority of the abuse that I've seen come from the 8 Passengers YouTube channel started after Jodi became involved with Ruby Frankie, which is why Jodi is going to be the center of attention on today's episode. I don't personally know why they made him sleep on the floor. And in fact, there's a video on a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers where the person uploading the videos is not Ruby Frankie. The person uploading the videos archived her videos and is re-uploading them in such a manner that you can actually see the abuse. So let me see if I can pull it up. I think the big stop that. I think the big one. Stop that. I think I think the big instance that I have taken notice of is when they sent their eldest son away to the Anasazi camp in I think it's in Arizona. And
Mhm.
though this camp is what I would consider a conversion therapy camp, um, it's not controlled by the Mormon Church, and I think that's what Kevin Franke wanted, is to get his son away from place from Jodi Hildebrandt. Let's see. Let me pull up this video
Well,
and put it on screen for everyone. Okay, so on the left is Kevin Franke, and on the right is Ruby Franke.
it's a serious video when it's me sitting down and talking. But if it's the two of us sitting down and talking, it's like
Even more serious.
really serious.
We decided.
Okay, so they're not going to give any specifics in this video about why they sent their son away, but I'm pretty damn certain that it's because of Jodi Hildebrandt. I think Ruby is sending Chad away because she believes Jodi and believes that her eldest son is a sexually abusive male. I think the reason why he's being sent to Anasazi, though, because Kevin doesn't believe Jodi. And there's a little bit behind that makes me believe it, especially the fact that not too long after Chad came back from that camp in Arizona, Arizona. After Chad came back from his time in Arizona, pretty much right afterwards, from what I understand, Kevin and Ruby separated. Let's
For like a week, right?
I think by the time this video goes up, it's probably been 2
2
weeks
weeks.
since you've seen Chad. Okay, so I don't even know where to begin. I feel like this all happened so fast that I don't even, like, it was a whirlwind. I think parents will relate to this. Have you ever been in a situation with your kids where you just, like, you have to act? Kind of like when your child runs out into the road. I've had this experience with each of my 6 kids, so it's like traumatic. I've done this with each of my kids where your child runs out into the road and you don't have time to emotionally process it. You just act. You just run out there and you grab your kid, and then by the time you get yourself and your kid to safety, then the emotions start pouring in and you start crying and you realize how close you came to losing your kid. That's what I feel like I'm experiencing now. Like the last 2 weeks I've just been like, go, 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 do it. This is
Mind you, when it comes to people in the Mormon Church, you get this reaction when you find out your kid's been masturbating. At this point in time, Chad is 14 or 15 years old. He's nowhere near getting out of high school. Like he had just been in high school. Like just started. Okay, so that's the video, and I'm going to post all of my source links in the description on our video once we finish today's podcast. But now I want to get directly into Jodi. Now, the girl on screen right now is Jessie Hildebrandt, who is Jodi Hildebrandt's niece. Jessie Hildebrandt was abused by Jodi in the late 2000s. And her parents, Jessie's parents, approved of it. As did the Mormon Church. Take a listen to this.
And the church knew, at least my local ward, Bishop Bangeter knew what was happening. And this is getting a little ahead of the story, but people in the church in my ward started becoming very nervous about what was going on. They were becoming very concerned with just my physical, like what I was looking like in the church. And they went to Bishop Bangeter and voiced their concern about, like, they're like, something is wrong. And Bishop went to Jodi and told her, gave her the names of these people. And she would have, what she did, I had to, the reason why these people thought anything was wrong, according to her, was because I was emotionally manipulating them into thinking that. I would go to church and wear a long face and manipulate them into feeling sorry for me, which was a very common theme about, like, through the entire process of living with Jodi, was if someone liked me, if someone felt sorry for me, it was all because of manipulation. And I was a masterful manipulator. Constantly, I was told this, constantly.
Comments?
That puts gaslighting to a whole new level and to a whole new field, especially when you're talking about, I believe she was a teenager when that was happening, right?
Very young teen, yes.
Her
She was 15 in like 2008, so yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty familiar with how the Mormon Church treats teenagers, especially once they feel that need shepherding in their flock. I had 5 friends that were in the Mormon Church, and one girl I remember named Alex that had a crush on one of the guys at the Mormon Church ends up going with him to try and embrace it, and then, like, all of a sudden, I remember being at a random friend's house. She comes running in through the garage and like screams, "Don't let them know I'm here," and then disappears. And all of a sudden, a van pulls up, and I see one of my other friends' little brothers doing his mission at 18, trying to collect her. And I'm like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" "Oh, we're here to get her." And I'm like, "Why?" "Because she has church." It's like, she doesn't look like she really wants to go. And like, "Well, let us talk to her." It's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't go. And, if it wasn't for the fact that I knew the person, but seeing them do that, and to a 16-year-old girl, because we were teenagers at the time, it was just disturbing.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
oh, I was just wondering, so, because I've heard this word mentioned a few times, and so is a ward kind of like the Mormon version of a church, or is that something else?
Yeah, the ward is your local congregation,
Uh,
and there are different levels to the ward. And the temple is for, like, people who have a blessing from their bishop or their uh patriarchy leader, something like that. You don't get into the temple unless you have a blessing,
oh,
and they can
oh,
revoke your blessing.
hmm.
Okay. Um
To the point where, I mean, I believed it. I was like, you're right. I must be this horrific. And I was already believing I was evil because I was gay. And so, like, she plays into things that are already there. She finds the hot point and then drills into it. And she does this. I almost guarantee anyone that comes forward with a story about Jodi, this is what she did. And so I had to go around. We drove to all these people's homes, and she sat me in the car. She told me exactly what I was going to say to these people. She coached me on every word, and I would go in and I would have to apologize to them for manipulating them into thinking that something was wrong, and that Jodi was actually saving my life, and that that God was, this was all brought because of prayer and revelation and visions and dreams, and that Jesus was And it sounds ridiculous to say now, but at the time it's like I said, like, Jesus is working here. And it, like, the way she would describe it to me, because she would talk to me a lot about what was happening and why she was doing it, um, in very, very abusive ways. But she would say, like, we have to do these extreme things because this is spiritual surgery. And that's how she would rationalize it, is that it has to be extreme because we are surgically removing the sin. We're surgically removing the sin from your soul. We're surgically removing Satan from you. And so I would go to house to house. She would tell me exactly what to say. She was in the room. If I would deviate at all from the script, she would be like, and she would pull me back. And then I would be like, I'm sorry, I just try to manipulate you in this moment. Because if I deviated, that was manipulation.
That's fucking sick.
Yes. Yes, it is.
This isn't just gaslighting. This is projection. This is absolutely projection. You're teaching someone that they're manipulating people, but the person manipulating people is the person telling you that you're manipulating people.
Yeah. When I heard the story about how she had to go around basically apologizing for making people
Feel sorry
making
for
people
her?
worry about her. Yeah. I'm now beginning to question whether or not this is a case of someone who actually believes what they're doing, or is just like is some sort of narcissist who is just kind of getting off on fucking with people, or someone who's at least cynically, knows what they're doing and is doing it for profit or some other depraved reason.
We've talked about narcissists on the podcast before.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 forms of narcissists: pure narcissists, people who are just simply trying to control you.
Mm-hmm.
And they generally do that on a one-person level. Then you have sociopaths.
Mhm.
Sociopaths, they believe their bullshit, and they're trying to take control on a mass scale. And then there's psychopaths. All sociopaths are narcissists. All psychopaths are narcissists. Both of them want control. But it's the level at what control they want and how much they believe in their bullshit. But not all narcissists are either sociopaths or psychopaths.
Right. But I guess what I was trying to say is I'm questioning whether she actually believes her bullshit or is just knowingly knowingly going about this for some ulterior motive.
She
If you're
believes her
looking
bullshit.
for an answer like, ma'am, why did you do all of this? Oh, I did it for money. I did it for fame. You're not going to get an answer that straight cut. It's going to
Right.
be a mixture between, this is what I believe in. I'm going to force this belief onto everybody else. What do you mean 2 + 2 is 4? I say it's 7. What do you mean that doesn't make sense? I told you it's 7. If you don't listen to me and accept that it's 7, I'm going to make your life fucking miserable. Okay, 2 + 2 is 7. Good, we're on the same page.
So high demand religions, they have this uncanny ability to attract sociopaths and basic narcissists. In fact, they breed narcissism into children that are born within the church. Be it Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, what have you. They breed narcissism into these kids, and if it's complex enough, it can become sociopathy. If kids, even the kids that get out, often suffer from narcissistic abuse disorder. And we've also talked about what happens when people who are confronted with their narcissistic tendencies, what they do. They're going to have one of two reactions, and most of the time the reaction that they have is diving deeper into those narcissistic tendencies, which makes them become a full-blown narcissist.
Something that a lot of psychologists and people who break down a person's characteristic to understand their mindset will almost always tell you a very common formula. It doesn't have to make sense to everybody else. It just has to make sense to them. That's it. That's all it is.
Well, I think it comes down to, like, when they asked Charles Manson, why did Charles Manson do what he did? And the answer is never going to be able to satisfy a rational person. If I remember correctly, Charles Manson say it was to get them to the infinite soul. And gave some, like, off the cuff insane answer.
Right. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but we have a question from
Yeah,
Stoner. He's
Stoner.
asking if you could explain what a narcissistic abuse disorder is.
Yeah, I can do that. So, narcissistic abuse disorder is what happens when you're raised as a child by a narcissist. You see all of these narcissistic tendencies, and just the same as, a boy wants to emulate his father, or a girl wants to emulate her mother when they grow up, a child wants to emulate their parent that's a narcissist, because they have it in their head that this is normal behavior. And as they grow into an adult, they start to exhibit all of these narcissistic tendencies. And they will continue to do that until they're confronted with the fact that they're doing this narcissistic bullshit. At which time, they either dig deeper and it becomes full-blown narcissism. It's no longer an abuse disorder. Or they realize, I was abused, I need to stop that. I was raised by a narcissist. She will never admit that she's a narcissist, because she was raised by two narcissists that and the one that's still alive, I will never have contact with for the rest of my life. I keep very low contact with my parent that is a narcissist. I have extreme boundaries so that she can't, she can't try to control my emotions. And for a long period of time in my early 20s, I displayed narcissistic tendencies. It took me sitting down for a long time by myself, I'm talking years, alone, for me to root out and get rid of all of my narcissistic tendencies. I hope Stoner will take that as enough of an explanation. Okay, so this is the part of the video where Jesse is explaining that it wasn't all, or it didn't start out as horribly abusive.
Goal to keep a child from school, and I wasn't allowed to use the phone. I wasn't allowed to use the internet. I wasn't allowed to use any form of communication with people other than my grandparents, my aunt, young women's leaders, things like that. I was also
Were you
had
living
a
with
lot
both? Were you going back and forth?
I was going back and forth, and I had a lot of rules, like structural rules. Like I had to be awake by 7:30. I had to make my bed. I had to make sure everything was clean and organized, that I helped my grandparents. So I had a lot of those types of rules, which again, doesn't seem very, I mean, I think it's extreme, like an extreme reaction to what was going on. I looking back and knowing where I was emotionally and mental health wise, I needed love. I needed to be seen. I needed validation and safety, and emotional safety. I needed answers. I needed to I there was no conflict in my home because it wasn't allowed. So there was no space to be angry. There was no space to feel anything other than being digestible, being, the docile, happy, helpful. I'm certain lots of you have seen that documentary, the Stay Sweet and Pray one.
Keep sweet,
Yeah. So
keep sweet, pray and obey, I think it's called.
Yeah, that one. That's what's expected. And if you, especially as like a condition, like a female conditioned person, like I didn't fit into that role. I didn't fit into that categorization. I didn't fit into that temperament.
Let's see if I can find where. Okay. Here's her describing the abuse.
It was so bad that I would fantasize about jumping off the balcony and breaking my legs or stabbing myself, because I was like, going to the hospital would be better than this. And when I went to the police, I told them, like, can you just arrest me? Because I was like, I would rather be in jail. Like I will go commit a crime so you can arrest me so I can be out of Jodi's care. And then finally I ran away. I hitchhiked up to Salt Lake from Lehigh. And when I finally did run, I ran. And I remember I ran accidentally into the golf course, and the golf course is surrounded with a fence. And I had a full-blown panic attack when I realized that I was trapped, because as I was running, I thought the whole time, I was like, she's right behind me. She's right behind me. Any minute she's going to find me. She's right behind me. And I ran into the golf course, composed myself, started running again. I ended up sleeping in a church that night. I don't even remember where it was, somewhere around Lehigh. I walked for a long time though. And then the next morning, I stole a $5 bill and a $5 bill, a pen, and an ear warmer from one of the coats at the church. And I remember thinking, I'm going to write down the address so that I can mail this. I was overwhelmed with guilt of like, I'm so evil. And I was like, I'm going to mail a $5 back to this bishop or to whoever's at the church, because I'm so evil for doing this. But I just need food. And I ended up getting picked up by someone who ended up being the sweetest man ever. And him and his wife got me a pair of sweats. I was also like wearing a skirt. I had the jacket that I had was because Jodi would take my jacket away after I started running, like after the first time I ran away from her office. But what had happened was her colleague had found this big rain jacket, windbreaker, reversible jacket in the parking lot, and threw it in the room that I was staying in, that I was like isolated in. And it wasn't, I up until like this very moment, I don't think it was intentional, like to give to me. But now that I think about it, I'm like, I wonder if that was the case. But she put it in that room because they found it in the parking lot. And I remember the door was open. I have a jacket. I need to run. I need to go. And I remember that moment so vividly of It is now or it is never. I am not getting out of this unless I leave right now. And I didn't think twice. I grabbed the jacket and I just ran and ran and ran. And I had a skirt on. I had moccasins on that my feet were coming through the bottoms. I'm certain I looked horrendously unwell. I had lost tons of weight. My stomach was eating itself alive. There was blood in my stool. I was very unwell. She also, like, I was vegetarian. I wasn't allowed to be vegetarian. She would withhold food. It's just insane. So I ended up hitchhiking to the road home in Salt Lake City under a fake name. I told these people that picked me up that I was 18. I went by the name Rudy Jude, which is like such a fake name. And they figured out that I was a minor. I kept slipping up on my name and stuff, and they'd said, like, you either need to tell us who you are so we can help you, or we're gonna have to take you to the shelter because we can't harbor a minor. And I was like, take me to the shelter. I was too afraid. I was too afraid that Jodi would get me. And I lived in the shelter for months. The timeline of the shelter, like being homeless, is really, really fuzzy. There was everything that goes along with being a homeless female that happened. I did eventually get caught by some detectives. And then I went back to living with my grandparents. Thankfully, they didn't make me go back to Jodi's.
Anyways, so and I didn't hear her describe it, but she was sleeping in Jodi's office, which means she was
Yeah.
sleeping on the floor.
Mhm.
Let's see.
And
There,
how was this video come out after Jody's getting charged with child abuse, or is
yes,
this from?
it
Oh,
it
alright.
actually happened after Jodi and Ruby were denied bail. Um, excuse me for eating.
No worries.
So Jodi and Ruby got caught and arrested and put in jail. They were charged with child abuse, which I think is only the 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 first of many charges, because from how Jesse describes this, it wasn't just physical abuse, it was sexual abuse too.
Mm.
And doing that to someone as young as Ruby's kids, who were, not even 10 yet. I think her youngest
Mhm.
was like 5, maybe. That's disgusting.
Yes. Yeah. Could there also be some sort of like kidnapping charges? Because it sounds like she wasn't letting these people leave.
No, because Ruby was living with Jodi,
Oh.
and she had custody of the kids. And speaking of that, I'm going to move on to Adam Paul Steed, because this is where you see the absolute vindictiveness of Jodi and how she will do anything and everything to destroy men's lives, the husbands of the women that she manipulates. This is a 6-hour interview that had to get broken up into 2 different days. I'm going to try to skip the Boy Scouts Yeah. So we'll skip the segment of the Boy Scouts. That was like the first hour of the interview. Because he became well known as a agitator in the Mormon Church because he sued the Boy Scouts and he got his abuser put in fucking jail.
And so he was Mormon at the time, or was he non-Mormon?
He was Mormon up until after he got divorced from his ex-wife. And he's something like 45, 46 now.
So we get into this therapy group. Jodi's really charismatic. My wife starts just loving it. I'm excited she's getting help. And some of the personal issues that she had struggled with. And I didn't originally mind the strictness with the group because I thought that, it was therapeutic to, there was a lot of guilt and shame behind masturbation and pornography in the Mormon Church. I mean, I had a lot of guilt and shame. I mean, as a kid growing up, I had discovered masturbation a few weeks before I met Brad Stolz. And just on my own quietly, and I always believed that God sent this pedophile into my life to punish me because I was a sick person. I had a lot of guilt and shame, and I was like, I was good everywhere else.
This is what the Mormon Church does to people. If something bad happens to them, they think it's because they masturbated.
In my life. But inside I had this one area that, in my childhood mind was basically, if you look at a woman and you lust after her, that's the same thing as committing adultery in your heart. That's like a teaching in the New Testament or something. And then other scriptures that said that committing adultery was the same thing as next to murder. You do the spiritual geometry in an innocent child's mind, and you keep struggling back and forth with, I remember, I think it was Cindy Crawford on the underwear section of Sunday Paper. That was my, I
What do you take from this?
Mormonism is kind of like a cult.
I wouldn't
not kind
say
of.
kind of.
Yeah.
It is a cult because you have now taught kids that masturbation, something that is natural to all human beings, is the same as murder.
Mass murder. Oh, there's potential children
Okay,
that could have.
stop that. It's only mass murder if males do it.
Right. But what if the eggs turned into twinsies? They shed more than just one.
They have to be fertilized first.
Ah, logic.
So therein lies the first problem. Masturbation is treated as murder. On top of that, you add in Jodi Hildebrandt, and she thinks every single human being except for adult women that come to her is masturbating. And just like her niece said, she's doing spiritual surgery. She's cutting out the sin.
I demand
Bullshit.
a full investigation on her computer. I demand to know what her browsing history is. I bet you will find some explicit content.
Oh yeah, and I guarantee it's lesbian.
Well, it kills me that in this current day and age we have so many fanatical extremes. and the harm that that's causing when it comes down to, say, this extreme versus teaching kids as young as you possibly can to do this and explaining to them how, and like the gray all the gray areas and inappropriate places we're putting these kids on both sides of the fanatical spectrum,
Uh-huh.
and you can't argue in between with the either extreme because they're so far gone.
We
And
must either exploit our children to all the sexual content, or we must ironclast their chastity until we deem them ready.
oh
What
god,
about
yeah, the
what about just
chastity belt.
educating them? No, that middle cannot be done. We cannot educate them on this. We own their bodies. I don't think that's how this works.
Before I jump any further into Adam Paulsteed, I want to jump into a video from Cults to Consciousness, because I want to make something extremely clear about Kevin Franke. I do not believe he could have done more to save his kids. I do not believe it. And it's because of Adam Paulsteed, but there are a lot of people on YouTube, including Kevin's sisters, saying that he could have done more. He should have done more. But I'm going to show you with Adam Paulsteed why he couldn't do anything.
The families and everyone involved that they're not allowed to speak about certain things. They didn't say what the certain things were. I'm assuming one of the certain things is the kid.
Post a few of your comments on the screen here. We got our first super chat. Lissa, I believe this is the same Lissa that's one of our patrons. Thank you so much for your support. Lissa says, thank God that Kevin didn't get the kids. He definitely knew what was going on. This has been happening for at least 3 years or more. How topical. Perfect timing. Yeah, I saw the statement from Kevin's lawyer, and it was very vague and basically just like, yeah, I cannot speak to what he knew was or was not going on, but Ruby did call him before the cops got there. Somehow she knew that she was about to go down for what had happened. So she knew what she was doing was wrong because she called her husband, because they're not divorced yet, a separated husband, and said, you need to get over here now, emergency. And he's like, well, I'm at work. And in your video you're like, really, that's the response? There's an emergency and your response is, well, I'm at work.
Yeah. And I've had a ton of people come for me on Instagram today to that video. And they're like, well, yeah, he was used to her narcissistic ways. Of course, he's not, she's like the boy who cried wolf. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Excuse me, you have 6 children with this woman, 4 of which who you left in her care willingly.
Yeah.
According to your lawyer, you willingly stopped having contact with them. And so no, you don't get to just be absent and
Yeah.
not make any effort. You didn't call them. That's what your lawyer said. You haven't called them.
Okay, so we're about to see the dichotomy between men and women and custody of children. And this is the average, especially in the Mormon church. Let me see if I can find it. So this is when Adam Paulsteed is talking about the restraining order that his wife got against him thanks to Jodi Hildebrandt.
Amanda, tune in to Channel 2 News for Amanda's coverage of the story. Okay, it closes by saying Jodi observed that over the past year she has witnessed Morwenna go from an extremely emotional, abused, neglected, sickened state to a healthy woman. So Jodi saves Morwenna from the mental health, from bad mental health things. At this stage, Morwenna is not seeking revenge against Adam. She merely wishes to provide information to BYU and then let the matter go. If her efforts result in protecting someone else, that would be good. And then it's signed, I certify the above information is correct. Honor Code Office Representative Edward Morin. All right, that's the letter.
Yeah.
So that's what Jodi That's all the stuff Jodi said to him about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we go next to the restraining order? Because I think that's how you end up with 4 felony charges against you, right?
The legal document that we've got.
So can you talk about what was going on there and how it happened?
Yeah, so while my ex-wife and Jodi are coaching this whole thing out, and this is interesting because I have had several other people share with me that the exact same thing happened to them, with the in the sense that they went to Jodi, they tried to get out, and then suddenly there were protective order, a crazy civil case divorce with a protective order, and then suddenly there were protective order violations that criminalized them.
Yeah, so if anyone tries to get out of Jodi Hildebrandt's
boundaries,
therapy and scheme of extorting thousands of dollars a month from the couples, if you try and get out of that, quote, therapeutic relationship with Jodi Hildebrandt, she tells the wife to file a restraining order on the husband and alienates
she
him.
doesn't just tell him; she coaches them through on how to do it. How to.
There's no way you're the only victim. Anyway, keep going.
Hey, baby. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
the chat.
I see it. I see it. I see it. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, guys. I was eating and I didn't want everyone online to hear me. So when it comes to the restraining order, basically the way that this works is Jodi and Morwenna talk through how to get a restraining order against Adam. And the first step was to put in place these quote unquote relationship boundaries, this relationship contract. Things like you don't get to sleep in our marital bed. You have to give me money, no question asked. It's my money. You have to provide it. You don't get to know where I'm going whenever I leave the house. For all intents and purposes, you're just a friend. Which sounds to me like the woman was going to sleep with other people, namely Jodi, because she spent way, way, way too much time with Jodi. Way too much time with Jodi. And at one point in this whole fiasco, he goes and he lays down in his marital bed. Now, she's not in the bed. His wife, Morwenna, is not in the bed. But she calls the police and tells them that he attempted to rape her. No, he got in the bed because he is sick and tired of sleeping on the couch. If you don't want to sleep with him, you go lay somewhere else. Whoever gets the bed first, fine. I don't care. But he was in the bed first. Let him fucking sleep. So she calls the police, accuses him of attempted rape, and there's 3 separate instances that she called the police to the house. And each individual instance, she's doing anything and everything she can to manufacture a way to get him out, to get him arrested. And the cops just aren't having it. At one point during a fight, he tried to leave the house. And she stood in front of the house. Like, she stood in front of the door. And he grabbed her, not in any threatening manner. He grabbed her by the sides, picked her up, put her to the side, and walked out the door. She called the police. Police were like right around the corner. And they come up and they're like, so did he hit you? No. Did he touch you? Yeah. Were you in front of his way out the door? Well, yeah, but no, there's no but. That's called entrapment. Okay, back to this.
Okay, so Bishop, so now I'm served with a protective order at that BYU setting, a temporary. It's like 2 weeks later, I get an official one in court, and at that point, there's this protective order in place. Some time goes by. It's super tough on our family. I have to pick the kids up at the police station, have someone that's 21 years old or older with me. Now, those people that start coming with me, the honor code starts calling them in and threatening them that they can't be near me. And that's where those honor code files, where there's all these different people that the honor code interviews about sexual abuse that happened to them as a kid and all this stuff, and then it gaslights them, accuses them of having an affair, and puts them on probation with the one girl. And I just wanted to do, I have my kids with me, and I just wanted a safe place for them, and I took my close friends, and eventually I ran out of close friends to do this with. I mean, they're still my friends, but I started inviting friends at school. Hey, can you help me with this? I just have to do this. The honor code office was going after these people. So during that time, my bishop calls me, an elder, Bishop Olson, and he says to me, I just met with her. Your wife, Morwenna, she still loves you. She totally thinks we can work this stuff out. You need to really work to let her know that you care about her still, and that you love, and that we can fix this thing. And
so we're about to get into the setup. We've been deep in the setup already, between her trying to get him arrested, and now she's got a restraining order against him. What happens when you violate a restraining order?
You go to jail.
Yeah, here's what happens.
And he said she needs a stroller, and he mentioned which one. It was like an $800 stroller, and she needs her journals back, which would have been very incriminating in a court to show what those had said. And she, and I thought, I remember crying when I left. I thought, oh, maybe this will get fixed still. And I asked him, I said, are you sure it's okay? Because the protective order says you're the ecclesiastical leader. We can contact each other. He said, go to the police station, give her these things. He called her. She said it was okay. I go to the police station with these items. I give them to her. I first asked her, is it okay if I give these to you and we talk? And she said, yeah, it's okay. I talked to the bishop. Everything's fine. And she just smiled. And I really felt that she was telling the truth. I gave her these things, and I smiled, and I was really nice to her. And then out of nowhere, she just turns and accused me that I was a homosexual. just randomly. And I just looked shocked. And then she acted like she just looked at me like this and went and hopped in the car. And she left our baby's door open when she got in the car. The door's open, the car seat's there. I'm just shocked because that was a huge trigger for me in my psych evaluation report that she'd been reading and that Jodi had been reading and that they'd been sharing with everyone. And so, yeah, if you feel me right in that moment, I probably looked disturbed, but not angry or upset at anyone. And then I noticed that she's driving away with the door open to our baby. And I just looked over and I said, wait, hold on. And I waved to her. I said, you left the door open. And she goes, oh, okay. And I said, here, I'll just shut this door. So I shut the door and I just waved to the kids goodbye. And that's what happened. And 3 or 4 days later, when I went to pick up the kids for something, I got subpoenaed like a half-inch page of papers. And those papers said that I had 4 felony charges against me. And they had exhibits in it. And one of them was a picture of a card that was like, hope you get better, her picture of her journals, a book by Elder Holland that said Broken Things to Men. The bishop had talked to me about getting her that. And yeah, I had 4 felony charges. And this itself is an illegal document because breaking a protective order is not a felony in the state of Utah. It's only a felony if you are already a felon. And I had absolutely no criminal record whatsoever. And so I had 4 felonies, and it said 20 years in prison that I could get, and I was terrified.
So this is just the surface. This is just the start of the entire downswing for him losing his kids. He didn't end up getting convicted for these felonies. He took a plea agreement for one count of attempting to disobey, or not disobey, but to violate a protective order. But
Did he get any time, or?
No, he got some community service from what I understand. But the simple fact that in the state of Utah, with all of the proof that he's had this entire time, going up in front of a judge, going up to a prosecutor, saying there is some damning evidence against the person that's saying these things about me, and you still get a misdemeanor, you still get convicted of a misdemeanor charge, that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
do you think he shouldn't have taken the plea and just tried to fight it in court?
No, because you can't. You are screwed when it comes to the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church has too many people on the bench. They have too many people as lawyers, and they have too much sway in the state of Utah, which is where this is going down right now. They are too fucking powerful. And I know a lot of people say that the Church of Scientology is like the most rich church in the world. That doesn't matter. They don't, while they do some really shitty fucking things, they do not have that same type of power in a state. They don't have that same type of power in the country. They can make you they can make you hurt by dragging a case through a court for decades, the same way that they did against the IRS, but they don't have the same power to make individual people hurt because they have power of the state, which is what the Mormon Church has. They have power of the state. Let me try to scan through. Okay, so the next section is Adam being arrested and losing his parental rights. I'm gonna quickly scan through and try to get to the main points.
They arrested me and they put me in chains, and they said that because it was felonies, I couldn't get off on bail. And they arrested me, and then they said that the judge went on vacation, so I was in jail for a long time. For
it was a month, right?
Yeah. Well, originally I put 14 days in my post when I was writing about this, but I actually saw in the records it said 7 days. I just
somewhere between a week and 2 weeks you're in jail.
Yeah. So I got out of jail, and as soon as I got out of jail, I got a letter from BYU, from Steve Baker, saying that I was kicked out of the university, and that a return was, yeah. And you've got.
And for anyone who doesn't know, BYU is a Mormon university in the state of Utah. It is heavily controlled by the Mormon church.
Right.
Livery. Let me finish.
Yeah.
And then Jodi says to Morwenna, give ACAFs the right thinking because they are not going to come up with those thoughts themselves. It is difficult when you begin to see what is really going on to be patient with those who don't. Be direct and clear and act inquisitive, not angry or defensive. Make them think that they came up with the idea themselves. Keep me informed about Wednesday, Jodi.
Yeah, so this is an exchange between Jodi and Morwenna about how he has to see his kids now, and he has to go through a legal center that facilitates child visitation, and he didn't know exactly what to do.
Mhm.
So what he did was he brought some clippers and he gave his son a haircut, the same way that his father did for him when he was a kid. He thought that would be a good bonding experience.
Mhm.
And this email from Jodi to Morwenna basically says, "Oh, well, just make this facilitation center think that this is child abuse, so that he can't touch the kids anymore. He can't hug his kids. He can't kiss his kids. Nothing."
Mm.
Yeah, that's dark. Anything you want to say?
My wife wrote her back in the next email. She goes, "Those suckers, they totally fell for it." And then when I was picking up my kids at ACAFs, they no longer let me do like 3/4 of the things that my kids and I routinely did. They pulled me aside and they said that they had to put me in way more strict observation.
Yeah. We've got a couple other notes regarding either Ed Morin or Steve Baker, and I'm not exactly sure where they fit in the story. So do you want to tell me?
So it's interesting that in the BYU Honor Code office, they have rules that they can't contact bishops. In a set of notes there, the one in your left hand, read the second. My ex-wife was going to Bishop Rife, was her bishop.
Okay, so this is Honor Code Office case notes by Ed Morin again.
Yeah, and that Morwenna or Jodi literally weaponizes the Honor Code office to weaponize Morwenna's bishop, to weaponize my bishop to get to me.
So this is Honor Code Office, BYU Honor Code Office, Ed Morin, making notes about Bishop Steve Rife, who was Morwenna's bishop after she left Adam. March 13th, 2000.
It seems Molly has joined us.
Am I early?
No.
Am I late?
Yes.
I mean, you're definitely not early, and we're definitely still here. So I'd say you just walked into class, and now we're all just staring at you.
Okay, can you retcon the start of the stream? It's happened now.
No, we have to take a moment to reflect and judge you. for your
Yeah.
tardiness.
Quick, put on
I hate
sunglasses,
this.
whip out the freaking Men in Black, blind the audience.
Yes. None of this is actually real, and all of you are at home sleeping. And now you just woke up to this.
Erica, I
Prove
think
it.
your microphone is off. I can hear you talking in the living room, but you're not coming through on the.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean, I can hear you talking. I'm like, I could sit here and let her keep being ignored, like she's being spoken over, and let that really grind her fucking gears.
I am sorry. I had shut off my mic so that I could go get my nail scissors because I had one poking out. So here's the basic rundown. We've got the 8 Passengers YouTube channel run by Ruby Frankie. She has gotten arrested along with her quote-unquote business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt, and not Judy, Jodi Hildebrandt. And Jodi is an extremely abusive person. She will do anything to destroy husbands, and she will physically abuse children. We've already gone through a little bit of the abuse that she dealt to her niece. And now we're going through the abuse that she's dealing to one of her victims, who is a husband. And I'm bringing this out to show other people that Kevin Frankie couldn't have done anything to save his kids from this.
Correct.
And we're just going over the parental alienation of the father figure from their lives. So all they can do is invest in their mom to keeping their mom happy in a Stockholm relationship.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Stockholm issues.
9. Talked with Bishop Steve Reif by phone. Home phone. I provided the last
Let me
known
see if
bishop.
I can get to the court
I
case.
provide
Somebody for breaking a protective order for the first time. They're only felonies if the person's already a felon. I have no criminal history. And see, because they made it felonies, when I missed court by 30 minutes for my BYU finals, I went to jail without bail. And Jodi and Morwenna let the Honor Code Office know while I was in jail that I was there for abuse and domestic violence.
Yeah.
All that. It would have helped tremendously if the bishop who said that I could give those things to him actually kept his word and showed up and told the truth, like a bishop should tell the truth, to tell the truth. So I spent like $30,000 in a year or something of agony and time without a witness, whittling that down into me being a plea bargain where I plead guilty to an attempt to an attempt to break a protective order, which was a Class B misdemeanor. I think that's what it was. And I had to pay a fine, no jail time, just a fine. But to criminalize me because of this was just absurd.
Yeah. Well, we can maybe we can move to the final dismissal letter you got, unless you want me to. You'd given me this.
I'm still trying to find it, but yeah. So he didn't even do community service. He paid a fine.
Obscene. He said I belonged in prison. When he read my psych evaluation, he highlighted the part that said I was scared of what would happen around children. I'm saying this wrong. There's a part where I talked about the fear that I had of people seeing me around kids, because I lived in Southeast Idaho, and people came up to me as a kid, and this is in a real private, sensitive report with a professional doctor. And that one of the fears I had is people treating me different than the rest of the kids because they knew I had been a victim. They'd come up and said, well, that thing that happened to you at scouting, are you okay to be around kids? And that was super traumatic for me. So there's a part in there that says I was scared of what would happen when I'm around kids, talking in direct context in that report about the fear of people coming up and doing that to me. Doug Thayer highlights that and yells in the courtroom, see, he's the child abuser. Look, he's scared of what will happen when kids are around. He doesn't explain the context. He made me look like a child abuser. He's out there just this litigative attorney screaming about how dangerous I am. After He had milked my ex's parents for all the money they had and gotten to the deposition. His last string effort, everything had been thrown out of court by specialists who talked to me and looked at this. The psycho evaluator said that I had a little ADD and I was this, but a very caring husband, father, and that he didn't worry at all about me with the kids. And then they said, and then the psych evaluator said that Morwenna was a complex and sophisticated manipulator, and she absolutely talked about how bizarre this Jodi lady was. That was in our psych evaluation.
Now, I want to get on to the get back to the narcissistic abuse disorder topic just for a second. Narcissistic abuse disorder does not only develop when you're a child. Most of the time, that's when that develops. But it can also develop in adulthood. When you are an extremely emotional person and a narcissist comes into your life, they can manipulate you into becoming someone who displays narcissistic traits, which I believe is what happened with Morwenna, Adam's ex-wife. Because it was a night and day difference from his description between the woman that she was when he married her and the woman she became after they became involved with Jodi.
Right.
Let's see what we're talking about.
My ex showed up in the hospital or ordered me out of the emergency room and put me behind a desk over in a corner with my daughter. And then they would not let us see the medical records to know if my son was okay. I mean, my son, just yesterday, he and I were out having tons of as a special master. So I didn't have my rights restored through the progression that would happen because Bishop Thayer, who lied in court by not dismissing that he was her bishop, used her, sabotaged the whole thing through intimidation of some sort, probably her own sexual sins. She fell apart. I never got it. But then, like within 2 months, my ex-wife starts treating me like I'm normal again and just dropping the kids off me. So I didn't need to go fight in court to fix it if I had my rights. She just started bringing them back. She even started bragging that I was her glorified baby daddy and that I'd babysit whenever she wanted. She started traveling all over the country. Last minute, California, last minute, Mayweather fight, last minute, New York, some rich guy giving her Tiffany jewelry. She was just gone all the time. And it evolved in a situation where then I had the kids like 80% of the time for a couple of years. And we just lived like normal, peaceful life. My ex-wife treated me like I was completely normal and everything was peaceful. Until 2015, when I went to help refugees, and I was gone for a little while, and the kids lived in my house, and the school was right next to it, and the church was down. I came home because I heard my ex-wife was taking the kids out of the house. My parents had come and watched them. And when I got home, she was acting like she did all those years before where I was unsafe and unfit. I filed something to keep the kids from being pulled out of the home. I didn't think her life was really stable. And suddenly I went to the court to get my divorce decree. And lo and behold, Doug Thayer, all those years before in Marilyn Moody Brown's meeting, when they were printing off the final settlement agreement, he said, there's a problem with this document printing. Don't worry, just sign this cover sheet. We'll get it printed. That's the last I knew of that. And when I subpoenaed this in 2015, this divorce decree, it was the same decree that he had sent to us before we had mediation. And it said that I'd basically signed my rights away. I had no legal custody, no physical custody.
So what he's describing is he went through mediation during his divorce. And what happened was the first offer that they gave him during mediation, or that his ex-wife's lawyer gave him during mediation, was you get no legal custody no physical custody, nothing of your children. Nothing. And there was a months-long battle to get physical and legal custody of his kids. And he found out that the special master that they had assigned to oversee the mediation between him and his ex-wife was actually in the pocket of the lawyer. And so she eventually recused herself because the lawyer had come to her and basically said, "You're not going to give him anything." And she came crying to him saying, "I have to recuse myself because I'm in the lawyer's pocket." And this is right before they signed the quote unquote final document. But what the lawyer did was he did a quick switcheroo and basically said, "Sign this and we'll put it on the new document." But what he did was put it on the old document, the first one, the one where he would quote unquote agree to give up his physical and legal custody to his kids.
Is that legal to do?
No, it's not legal to do. But again, we're talking about Utah and the Mormon church. And this lawyer is a Mormon. And he's paid for by the Mormon church. He's a litigation lawyer. He's not a divorce lawyer. And he's doing all of this shady shit because Jodi, she's paying for it. The Mormon church is paying for it. Morwena's parents are paying for it. And when all is said and done, the Mormon church has almost complete control over the state of Utah. The only time that they don't is when there is something that is so visible that the Mormon church can't fucking deny it. That's why the Boy Scout case drug on for so many years. And that's why it's only now, after decades of Jodi's abuse, that she's actually in jail up on charges. When all of this happened with Adam, Jodi lost her license to practice medicine, but she's still a therapist for the Mormon church.
Right.
And she's still making money. She's still getting money from the Mormon church. The Mormon church is still referring people to her. It's only just now that she's in jail that the courts and the legal system can't do shit, and they actually have to do something about this woman. Because up until now, it's just been deny, deny, deny. You don't have any proof. Or if you have proof, it's not solid enough. And we can get rid of it with our lawyers. Now it's so solid of evidence that they can't, the court system can't ignore it anymore. This is the type of system that we're dealing with. When this religious establishment and these corrupt politicians and this corrupt government are so intertwined that the First Amendment is being violated on a daily fucking basis. Government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Yeah. Well, guess what? That's complete fucking opposite in Utah. Utah is controlled by the Mormon church. And given the fact that they've done all of this shit to Adam, up until now, it would have been impossible impossible for Kevin to do anything. Kevin would
Right.
not have won a court case in Utah. And if it wasn't for the fact that Jodi got caught abusing kids, she'd still be doing it. And he couldn't do jack shit about it. And I guarantee that Adam's ex-wife doing the same thing to Adam's kids. I guarantee it.
Mm.
Okay. I'm done with my rants. I've provided as much of a picture as I can within the past hour and a half. What does everybody think of this?
Burn the bitches at the stake. Burn.
I kind of tend to agree.
I think we should rephrase that to be more accurate. I think we should quote, "We have found a witch, may we burn her."
I
Yes.
mean, I got other demented ways to express this. Everybody knows that little gravity device where you take one item and it swings, it hits the line, and the vibration makes the other one swing back out, and it's like an endless freaking one side knocking into the other without anyone having to push the little balls. I feel like we should do that with their bodies. Just hang each and every one of them that are actually criminalized in this scenario, and then we'll just swing one and then make them whack right into the other and just go whack, whack, whack.
Okay, I tell you what. If we are considering these women witches, here's the first thing we need to do. We need to reason through this. So, what do we do with witches? We burn them, right?
Right.
Okay. So, what else burns?
Wood.
Flesh.
Okay. Okay, so if wood burns, what else does wood do?
It floats.
Smokes the flesh.
Okay. Okay, so if wood floats and wood burns and witches burn, what should witches also do?
Float.
Exactly. So what should we do?
You
We
should.
should weigh her
Throw-
against a block of wood.
Make them throw
We-
a shit ton of
we
wet
should-
cement so they solidify from the inside, and then
We-
drop their asses in the middle of the ocean.
We should throw them in the water because if they float, then they're witches, and then we can burn them at the stake.
Wouldn't you just make a boat out of them?
The joke, which I'm sure Dale has caught on to at this point.
Yep.
This is a skit from Monty Python where Sir
Yeah.
Belvedere is brought a woman that the entire village is claiming is a witch. And he reasons through what burns wood. What does wood also do? It floats. So what should we do with witches? We should throw them in the water, see if they float. If they float, they're witches. Let's burn them. Which led to a hilarious skit that I constantly use on Twitter.
Yes. I know. I was waiting there for the duck part. Yeah,
Bring out the
I
scales.
couldn't remember just how that got to it, but yeah, there's the
Yeah,
ducks
but
also float.
I
Something-
don't need to get to the duck because you got the gist.
Yes.
I know the perfect way to deal with these women. So we're going to keep them alive. They're gonna have a live burial, but they're gonna be turned into stone statues and then given to the Mormon community, and they'll be placed all around the Mormon churches, and they'll be like, "What a beautiful statue of a woman! The artist is amazing, bitch. That's a carcass in there." Sorry.
So the whole skit led to an even funnier skit. It's a Monty Python audio track only. It's called Logic. Where the same person that played Sir Belvedere actually plays a professor of logic, and says, "All wood burns," states Sir Belvedere. Therefore, all that burns is wood. and I use this constantly when I'm arguing with people that have flawed logic when it comes to things around trans people, government, firearms, First Amendment, what have you. If their logic is flawed, I quote and send them that very skit from Monty Python.
Oh, speaking of firearms and people's ignorance about firearms, did you hear what happened the latest with that insane New Mexico order?
Yeah, so there's a temporary restraining order against the governor and her order.
Yes. And then she amended it now and she changed the order to now only be in parks and in like public parks and stuff like that. So it's
Still doesn't fucking fly.
Nope.
That's public space, though. What the fuck?
Agreed.
Exactly. And it was not sensitive public space because in the Bruin decision they said there are places where you can restrict carry. Like
Mhm.
and the caveat to it is the places that you restrict had to have had police or security there on a consistent basis. So places like courthouses, legislative buildings, a governor's office, places like that. Those sorts of places you can restrict carry, but out in the public, even though those buildings are public, out in the general public, places like parks, on street corners, with streetwalkers, carry is completely legal, and they can't do jack shit about it.
Yeah.
The same thing's happening up here in Oregon with concealed carriers. Is they've been going after for several years the concealed carriers with Measure 114 passing. It also restricts what concealed carriers can do. So, like, I can use a stand mag at the gun range and at home. I can't use it for concealed carry. I can't use a stand magazine. I have to use a 10-round cap magazine every time now since that new law passed. And I'm like, well, it's stupid and dumb, but I can't really do anything about it. And they're going after legal carriers and going after our gun rights and limiting our gun rights and ability to defend ourselves when, they've literally dropped all basic possession and criminalization of drug and using drugs in public and so on and so forth. And then you have all these people that are just running around stealing whatever they can to afford their drug habits because they'd rather be homeless and not have bills and do any of that. They're going to have food because there's plenty of kitchens that feed the homeless, and they're always going to have an income of food.
Mm-hmm.
And then food stamps and everything else that they'll blow through or trade for drug money.
So
and it's this vicious cycle.
Here's the upside about that when it comes to capped mags, things of that sort. The Ninth Circuit has recently ruled, mostly on an injunction against that law in California, where magazine restrictions. They've also ruled on an injunction on things like microstamping. And this is the first time in years where the Ninth Circuit itself, not a judge of the Ninth Circuit, but an en banc panel, has ruled in favor of the Second Amendment. So hopefully that those laws that you're talking about, Freya, hopefully those will get overturned soon by the Ninth Circuit.
Mhm.
I hope so. I know a judge already ruled on it and said that they go within the values of gun restrictions.
Of
I don't
course.
remember
No, they
if that
don't.
was the Ninth Circuit or not, but that's where it comes down to is, we have it is still burned into everyone's minds 2020 with the riots that happened up in Oregon for a year plus. And you have a mob of people that just decide to hunt you down.
Well,
And there are people
it
murdered in the streets.
it may have been an appellate judge in the Ninth Circuit because you are in the Ninth Circuit, but it wasn't an en banc panel. The
Right.
en banc panel gets final say during the appeals process. So in the Ninth Circuit, just as any other circuit, you've got your federal judges, then you have your appellate judge, and then it goes to, generally in most circuits, it's a 3-judge panel, and then if it gets appealed beyond that, it goes to a full en banc panel, which is generally about 13 judges. And then if it gets appealed beyond that, it goes through a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court. But the Ninth Circuit isn't letting these cases go past them at this point because they know that most of the states aren't going to argue with their judgments because they don't want to see widespread changes in the field of legislation at the national level. It's going to be very rare for any of the states within the Ninth Circuit to appeal with a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court. So once the final en banc 13-judge panel gets a hold of it, it should change as long as they remain logically consistent and say, well, we've already ruled this way once, we need to keep ruling this way.
Why would it be difficult for them to get a writ of certiorari or whatever after, like, if they tried appealing to the Supreme Court?
It's not so much that it's difficult to get a writ of certiorari, but the states themselves don't want it going to the Supreme Court.
All right.
So if they lose at the full en banc panel, they don't want to appeal it.
Right.
Because
they're worried that they're going to get even worse or even better gun law or even better. Yeah.
Exactly. But getting a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court isn't difficult. It's getting the Supreme Court to take the case, because they only take anywhere from 2 to 4% of all of the writs that they receive. They review all of them, but most of them get denied or GVR'd. It's very rare that they'll take one and do a reverse and, give an opinion on a case.
Right.
Well, I can only hope just for the people of Oregon. Because, like I said, there has been nothing but an escalation of violence lately, and including online. And, then it comes to people's self-defense with all the drug addicts and everything else that are local in the area because they decriminalized all of it. And law enforcement is so overburdened, they can't do anything about it because their hands are tied by the local governments, too.
Are you referring to Portland specifically, or is this bad in other parts of Oregon too?
This is all of Oregon.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. So, unless you're in an area that's governed specifically by a sheriff, then you're SOL. If you're in a big city, you're screwed.
Right. There are other big cities in Oregon besides Portland?
Yes.
Oh.
There's Portland, Salem, Eugene, Bend, Medford, Klamath Falls, and several other areas, but those are the biggest ones. There's 36 counties in Oregon. So, and you're only going to have the local police departments in larger towns. There will be some, country areas or out in the middle of the woods where they'll have a local police department, but it's not going to be that big. It's usually dependent upon the state sheriffs. And state sheriffs will do their job, especially since they're elected sheriffs. So
Mhm.
usually during election times, they're usually on top of everything, and you'll see sheriffs all over the place. But then you have the state police, and then you have local police departments, and the state police have proven that they're under the thumb of the government. So when the first walkout happened over the Green New Deal, the Green New Deal was insane. It was
Yeah,
pushing a lot
fucking
of
bullshit.
rhetoric on climate change.
Mhm.
And they did a walkout because it's the only thing they could do because there was a supermajority that they were fighting against. So the governor, Governor Brown, made the decision to tell the state police to go and apprehend them and bring them back so they can do a vote, so they could pass the Green New Deal. So
Oh, yes.
she was taking political prisoners
Mhm.
and then, forcing against the rest. So they went out of state and stayed out of state to stay away from the police department or state police. And that's terrifying. Like to have that happen and seeing that get to that point. And then you have stuff happening right now with the current system. And it's like when we're literally sending law enforcement to harass, potential candidates and other government officials to force narratives, especially when they're just bad. Like the Green New Deal was a bad proposal.
Agreed.
And she tied so much of the forest clearing, the money for forest clearing and wildland firefighters to do their jobs. She tied all that to the Green New Deal, wouldn't untie it. And then we had the worst fires in Oregon's history happen.
And
they
then they
were
blame
doing
it on
nothing.
and then they blame it on climate change rather than just not clearing the forests.
Exactly. And that was the problem is like we started, even including myself, we're posting pictures of the forest floor. And you saw the overgrowth in the trees that would get infected by termites and bugs and then, turn into, pardon the expression, widowmakers and just
Yeah.
fall over all over the place or collapse under their own weight when the snow came. Or the tear chops that broke off the top from the snow when the wind would come by and the tree would be frozen. And, we had trees falling in the middle of the road. A major storm happened and a power line fell and then caught the area on fire. And then hundreds of thousands of acres burnt up, 770 structures, including 554 homes, were destroyed.
Okay,
Also,
And
for the record, that is a great picture.
yes, so up on the screen is a picture sent to us by our server mate Stoner. In reference to the Green New Deal, it says there, I fixed it, no more global warming, and it's a car with a face mask on the exhaust pipe of a car.
wonderful.
I find this idea completely not even possible. Why? We couldn't even get most of the population to wear their fucking masks for a period of time.
But
Yes,
it's not
but
even that, it's the solutions to it too. Okay, if we passed a mandate that you have to abandon all gas guzzling cars and you have to grab electrical, we just passed a $10,000 tax on your citizens. And actually, it would end up becoming more because of supply and demand. And then you create this artificial bubble where people who have the money to invest in electric cars are going to make money hand over fist because they can invest that money in these resource areas because of these demands for a green deal, like making our stuff green. And then they create this way for them to make money and other people they know to make money while also burdening the citizens of that area. But then the real burden on this is we're so worried about the environment. What happens to all the gas guzzlers at that whole state that now are not street legal? And you can't
Here's-
sell it to recoup the money to buy your new car because they're illegal in the state. You'd have to sell them out of state. And are we going to just throw them all in the dump? and produce that much more pollution in our environment, especially, cars sitting there leaking oil into the earth and everything, even though that's where we mined the oil from, was the earth. Dinosaur
I'm
blood.
I'm going to cut in here for a second and sound like
Go
Ian
ahead.
Crossland and say this is why we need graphene.
Can I just say something?
Go ahead.
No.
We should like establish like the Dutch system of road
No.
transportation. Basically, everyone uses bicycles,
No.
and
No.
for the cars that are like trash, then we need to dispose of them. We shoot them
Uh,
just into space.
No.
Erica,
We just
could you pull up a picture that superimposes the size of the Netherlands onto
yeah, that is a
some
problem. I
state,
know the U.S. is way bigger.
onto a
I know. It's like
small
nothing.
U.S.
It's
state?
like I know. It's like the state of New York. I know.
No.
Okay, well, my thing is I remember when
Like
I was a
a
kid
tenth of
in
the state
the
of New York.
90s, there was this one guy who personally paid for and afforded to make a hydrogen gasifier and put it in a car. And literally, you can go online right now on YouTube and make one yourself for like $5-10. And it separates the water or the hydrogen from the water, and you can use it to like blast a plastic bottle up in the air.
Yeah.
But you
My
can
dad
also
was
use,
actually trying to build that
yeah, see,
for
so you know
his
exactly what
car.
I'm talking about. But that's what I'm saying is like there's been a guy who has failed 90 something times to get the patent through the patent office to make that car functional, because then it would run on water, one of the most abundant resources on the planet. And only
Yeah.
2% of it's drinkable. And we could sit there and turn the other one into a fossil fuel. It destroyed the fossil fuel industry. And they don't want that. There's also other options. Like I remember talking about methane hydrate. Does anybody know
Well,
what methane hydrate is?
No.
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 It's concentrated crystallized methane. So
Okay.
Hmm.
it was
Sounds really
discovered
healthy.
on the ocean floor in the Bermuda Triangle. And that's what they believe was sinking all the ships. Because you'd have a ship that would go across it and hit a pocket of methane hydrate, and it would send tremors to the water, it would disturb it, and it would release methane gas in the water. And then it would change the buoyancy point of the water, and the boat would just sink like there was nothing there and
Interesting.
crash to the bottom of the ocean, and people would drown. That's also what they believe happened to Amelia Earhart when her combustion engine that breathes air flew over the area. There was a methane pocket, and then it just blew up the sky around her.
Yo,
Hmm.
I don't know about how her plane came down, but I am all for believing that wherever she crashed, if she crashed on an island, coconut crabs straight up cannibalized her ass.
Obviously, she just crashed because women are bad drivers.
Hey, she made it very far, okay?
She couldn't park on the island. Died in the
Bad.
Okay,
process.
so here's the big thing. Gasoline, bad for the environment. Diesel, better.
Better.
Much better. Much cleaner,
I
and
thought it was worse.
it
Okay,
used to
what if we
be.
get diesel
It
and then switch to fry oil?
yeah, well that's the whole point is biodiesel.
Why don't we just use the engine from a deuce and a half that the army invented like ages ago and just put every like
Here's
engine in a car like that, and it can just run on like cooking oil.
here's the thing about uh gas versus diesel. Diesel runs on compression. Gas runs on spark. It's easier to ignite gas. The reason why most people don't want to move from gas to diesel is because you lose horsepower. People want to go fast. Diesel is all about torque. There's a lot of power in the explosion from compression, but you get no high speed out of diesel. On top of that, there are some downsides to using diesel vehicles. You get exhaust clog. There is a lot of carbon buildup that occurs in the exhaust system because of these stupid recycling systems that are in the cars or in the trucks. So every vehicle these days has what's called an EGR and an EGR valve. It's an emissions gas recycling system. And when you combust gasoline or diesel, what happens is not all of it gets combusted. And so it'll get recycled. But when it gets recycled, it takes along with it some other stuff from the combustion of the other gas that was combusted. And it'll cycle through, and it'll create carbon that gets stuck in your exhaust. Generally, it wouldn't be an issue because you should be running your engine hot enough that you're burning off the carbon before it comes out of the exhaust. But thanks to these EGR valves, not all of it gets burnt off, and so there's a buildup in the exhaust system, and at some point sensors will fail that makes it so that the exhaust doesn't run hot enough to burn off all of the carbon. Diesel is much cleaner than it used to be. We're talking 70s, 80s, 90s. I've driven diesel vehicles my entire life. My first Volkswagen was diesel. My second Volkswagen was diesel. My current Volkswagen is diesel. The truck I drive on a daily basis is diesel. And these are clean vehicles. And the cars actually get better mileage than gasoline-based cars. But there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep that goes along with it.
And obviously you driving like a grandma.
I do not drive like a grandma. I do drive much less aggressively than I used to when I was in my 20s. But most of that has come from my time driving a truck.
But now she drives like a freaking White Valley girl on her phone.
How about you shut your mouth?
How do you fucking make me? You give me anxiety when you do that shit. I gotta start popping the pills like they're fucking candy just to survive the car ride.
At least it's nothing like driving with Bonnie.
That's a death trap.
Coda's like, ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh,
I
piece of candy.
pretty much you just fucking.
Okay.
I will chug them like little freaking like little mini M&Ms out of the tube. Just give me all the pills. You fucking hell.
Okay.
Not trying to OD, just trying to calm down.
So we've gone over the Mormon issue, and this is just a surf. Huh?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a thing about the hydrogen engine thing and the gas methane crystal thing.
Methane
So
hydrate.
yes, the big problem with that is the big gas giant and powerful politicians are not gonna let you do that shit. They're gonna try everything to just squander your plan because they're making high profit off of the gas and diesel industry, especially the Saudis. The Saudis are gonna fucking kill you over it because it's basically their entire economy you're trying to ruin.
They're only making that money because our politicians are fucking stupid to begin with. Okay, so with that said, we've gone over a surface level of Jodi Hildebrandt. And we can get deeper into this if you guys want, but the first thing that we have to do next week is an updated audit on Dale, which was supposed to originally happen today, but he said he was sick, so I scrapped it. So we're gonna get that done next week. I hope my co-hosts and my guest hosts will offer some topics for discussion, especially since I barely heard Drakena say anything today.
Yeah, honestly, I know nothing about Mormon stuff, so all this was like new to me, even after reading about it like half the day today. So
I'm so sorry that I flooded you with this.
no, it honestly, it's fascinating, just a bit over my head at this moment. So
We
It
can
gets
we can
crazy too. Even on a normal, I'm air quoting, but you can't see that normal side of the Mormon church. Like I said, with my experience, I got 5 friends that were in the Mormon church. I remember one of my friends, he was a stoner, and his parents were hardcore Mormon. Like, I remember coming over to wake him up for school to head out in high school, because he kept having problems getting there at 11. So, like, I was starting to stop by his house to try and make sure he wasn't getting in trouble all the time for it. And then finally, banging his door till he gets up. And it's like, do you have any coffee? No, we don't do coffee. What do you mean you don't do coffee? We don't do any
they don't drink
stimulants.
coffee.
What does that mean? Well, like, we don't even have sugar. Oh my God, what's wrong with your family? There's nothing wrong with this. This
We're
is how we do
different.
things.
that is just,
And like, I remember just sitting there going into it with him about like all the differences between, what he's going through versus what I'm going through at my home with my religious family. And my family was devout Christians. And then, his family being devout Mormon and tried to dedicate him to the church, but it's weird. So he's still dedicated to the Mormon church and religious values, but his favorite drink was Jägermeister and Red Bull. And I'm sitting there like
Jaeger bomb.
Jaeger bombing it, getting drunk. We and him used to drink 151 Bacardi and root beer together.
Fun bar
And
fact. Jaeger bombs are mostly known to be a popular drink amongst the neo-Nazi clans, as well as it's insulting to when people go to Ireland and they freaking ask for a freaking Irish car bomb. And it's like, dude, you are just asking for it.
Okay,
But
so it is now 7:00. We have been on for 2 hours, and it's time for us to say our goodbyes, so that we can just kind of shoot the shit in here. I will start with Molly. Please say goodnight, Molly.
Good night, Molly.
Of course, we're going to continue doing that as we
Yes.
should.
I need to put myself to bed.
Next, we will go to the guest hosts. We will start with our lovely Freya. Please say goodnight, Freya.
no, you're not my call mine supervisor. Don't tell me what to do.
you're not my dad.
And then we will go to Drakena. Please say goodnight, Drakena.
not everyone.
That accent, though. And then we will move to our resident co-host and Canuckistani, Dale. Please say goodnight, Dale.
Good night, everyone, and I shall see you next time.
Dirty fucking Frenchy Frenchman. And then we're going to go to Kota, my lovely fiance. Please say goodnight, Kota.
Good night, everyone.
And with that, I wish everyone a good night, a good weekend, and please, please do not drive like idiots this coming week because I have to be around you. I love you all. Thank you and good night.